These are commentaries on the Bible and the Bhagavad Gita, written by Swami Kriyananda and based on the teachings of Paramhansa Yogananda. Today's topic is, who are true Christians? Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. Jesus Christ said in the Gospel of St. John, "All that ever came before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep did not hear them." Many Christians, not surprisingly, quote this saying in condemnation of other spiritual teachers, not only the Old Testament prophets, but also Buddha, Krishna, and others who lived before Jesus, as well as by inference, any who came after him. Yet Jesus himself said in St. Matthew, "Think not that I am come to destroy the law or the prophets. I am not come to destroy, but to fulfill." Nowhere do we find Jesus condemning or even gently criticizing other spiritual masters. His criticisms were reserved for worldly attitudes and for those hypocritical Pharisees who had allowed religion to become for them a pretense. Yogananda explained that the expression, "all that ever came before me," referred to those spiritual teachers who placed their egos and their self-importance ahead of the Christ consciousness, in the sense of drawing people's devotion to themselves and not offering it where it truly belongs, to God. Yogananda himself was very firm in this regard. For example, he never spoke of anyone as his disciple. Instead, he always insisted, "They are God's disciples. God is the guru, not I." Ego is a way station on the soul's journey toward enlightenment. The soul is first trapped in lower bodily forms. Slowly, it evolves to the human level, at which point self-consciousness appears. Only in human form can self-consciousness transcend material form altogether, including the lower identity of ego consciousness, and discover the true divine self within. Self-consciousness manifested as ego is an incentive to deliberate self-development. Let me repeat that line. Self-consciousness manifested as ego is an incentive to deliberate self-development. Later in this process of development, however, the ego becomes an obstruction. Inevitably, new spiritual aspirants do not emerge effortlessly from this vortex of ego consciousness. Desire must be offered up resolutely and ever more wholeheartedly on the altar of infinity. It is a gradual process, and few, even among those who seek to help others, are free of ego. If, however, their motive in teaching is not to serve, but to be served, they deserve a severe reprimand, as Jesus gave them. For their direction of development is no longer upward, but downward. In the name of giving up desires, they are creating new ones. As it says in the Bhagavad Gita, "Desire obscures even the wisdom of the wise. Their relentless foe it is, a flame never quenched." Intellect, mind, and senses, these combined are referred to as the seat of desire. Desire through them deludes and eclipses the discrimination of the embodied soul. O Arjuna, discipline your senses, and having done so, work to destroy desire, annihilator of wisdom and of self-realization. Give God the credit for everything you do. See him as the true doer. Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind. So there's a lot in this reading. It's not just a simple, straightforward one. One theme is, who are true Christians? Well, I believe, as our masters have told us, that there are true Christians living in the world who have never heard of Christianity. And yet, their hearts are united with God. What does it say in the festival? Your chosen people have always been those of every race and nation who with deep love chose thee. That's what we have to do to be true Christians. We have to choose God. And how do we choose God? Well, it also says these words in the Festival of Light, doesn't it? With all my heart I choose thy love. With all my mind, with all my soul, with all my strength, I choose thy love. I choose only thee. And in order to choose God, we have to let go of all of those things that are thieves and robbers. For me, it's my cell phone. I have to turn it off. We have to get away from those things that are robbing us of our ability to think of God. I know there's an election coming up, but turn it off. Turn it off. The more excitement, in fact, I was reading an interesting article about the coming election, and it was saying that the polls show that there's not as massive a polarization in America as we have been led to believe by all the sensationalism of the media. The media exists because it's always putting out fear and problems and drama. You know, that's what sells news. But if you look at the people of America, this article was saying, they still believe in good principles. They still have that kindness towards others. America's a very kind nation. We've shown that again and again and again. Swami used to say if they want to put a man on the moon, all they need to do was send a dog up there and everybody would figure out how to bring the dog home safely. That's the kindness of America. So think in terms of getting rid of the thieves and robbers in your life. Don't buy that gallon of ice cream and stick it in your freezer. You know it's going to be a temptation. If I do it, I'm just going to eat it until it's gone. So don't bring it home. Start to work with yourself and get rid of those things that tempt you in a way that's not healthy for you. And another theme is spiritual teachers. It's one of the hardest things in the world to find a true path, to find teachers that are inspiring you and not leading you down the wrong path. Yogananda, before he found Sri Yukteswar, was in an ashram, and one of the principal teachings of that ashram was, don't try to find God too fast. You know, just do your work, study, do the service that we're trying to do here, and don't worry about meditation. Just do what we're asking you to do. And Yogananda said these kinds of teachings are very palatable. They're easy for people to go, okay, well, I don't need to meditate. But meditation is absolutely necessary if we're going to find God. So when you're looking for a spiritual teacher, what Yogananda tells us is to make sure that teaching, and this goes for books on health, all kinds of other books, entertainment, as well as spiritual teachers, look to see if it's aligned with ancient wisdom. The rishis of antiquity knew what they were doing. They knew what they had found. Align yourself with that, and you can never go wrong. If you go with the yamas and the niyamas, the do's and don'ts, the 10 commandments of yoga, things like nonviolence that Gandhi made so universally popular, which people still haven't quite tuned into, but still, it's one of the principles by which to live your life. Non-lying, non-stealing, non-attachment. All these things are so important. Introspection, tapasya, tapasya means doing a little bit of sacrifice, which isn't a palatable idea for many people. We want to just indulge and be comfortable and be in pleasure as much as possible. But sacrifice means sacrificing a lower desire for something higher. If we think, I want to eat as much as possible, especially ice cream, I've got a gallon of it in the refrigerator, it's not going to make us happy. It's going to make us sick. So instead of indulging that, as Yogananda said, when a temptation comes, just cut it off at the bud. When a thought comes in your mind, just cut it off right then. And put your mind in God. Let's see, what else do I want to say about that? There's a wonderful story that I've been reading recently. I may tell you a little story about this. I've been reading the life, well, not the life exactly, Ram Dass, not Richard Albert, but the saint Ram Dass, who lived, he was born in 1884 and died in 1966 in India, and he renounced the world at a certain point, and his spiritual practice was primarily saying the name of Ram, continuously chanting the name of God all the time. And he became a wandering sadhu and just entrusted his life into the hands of Ram. So when anything happened to him, he would just say it's the will of Ram, which is reminds me of Ananda Ma. One of her wonderful sayings was, whatever happens, it's okay. Very good thing to practice. And so Ram Dass, whatever happens, it's Ram's will. He knows best. Just go with it. And he, everywhere he went in his travels, he somehow found another sadhu who would go along with him, help him, and, be his Ram incarnate. He would call him the Ram sadhu. And so one day they were trying to, another sadhu, there were many along the path. This one Ram sadhu said, I think we should get on this train and go on a pilgrimage. Well, they didn't have any money and they didn't have any tickets. So sometimes sadhus, especially in that era, would just get on the train and people would allow them to do that. So they got on the train and the station master came running up and the ticket clerk came running up and said, no, you can't get on the train. So they got off. And then a policeman who's hired to keep people off the trains if they don't have tickets came up to them and said, "Come, get on the train." And the sadhu said, "No, they won't let us. The ticket master and the station master said we couldn't." So the policeman went over and he talked to the station master and the ticket clerk and said, "These men don't have money because they're not in quest of money. So they don't have money for tickets. We should just let them ride the train." And the official said, "No, no, 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 no. You are the policeman. It's your job to keep them off the train. Why are you advocating for them? This is in complete opposition to your job." And so the policeman thought about this, and he went back to them, and he was talking to the sadhus again, and he was struggling with himself. And finally, the station master went off to get the train moving. It was time for the train to come. And the policeman just went over and opened the door and beckoned them to come in. And the ticket clerk saw this, and he came running up. He was very angry. And the policeman stood tall and stalwart, leaned up against the door and said, "No one on earth will stop these sadhus from taking this train." And the ticket clerk was just furious. "What gives you the right? What higher authority gives you the right to let them on this train?" And the policeman said, "In cases like this, my friend," because he was very calm, in cases like this, the highest authority is one's own conscience. And the dictates of one's conscience, when they are very strong, is an indication of the will of God. And you can report me, even if I lose my job, if I'm dismissed from this service, nothing will prevent me from allowing these sadhus to take this train. So in Ram Dass's mind, as he was leaving the station with his Ram Sadhu, he was thanking Ram and saying that God is in charge of all of the creation, and it's his will that prevails. Even this kind policeman who may have lost his job, he risked everything, but he wanted to go by the dictates of his heart. So that's all we can do in this world. I should qualify this story by saying our gurus have told us never to presume on God. It's our duty to take care of ourselves, to keep a roof over our heads, to do all the things necessary to not be a burden on society, etc. But in the final analysis, we have to trust in God. We have to do everything we can. We have to put out tremendous energy, but giving it all to God and thinking of that energy itself as God doing it through us. That's one of the incredible mysteries of this life, is that we exist to become more and more aware of the presence of God within ourselves and within every one of us in this world. But we can't ever presume that God is acting through us. We have to keep checking in, keep asking, and never think, "Oh, I'm God." No, that's limiting God absurdly. We have to feel His will, His joy, His blessing moving through us out into the world. All we need to do is get out of the way of that flow. And just like little Ram Dass, there's bliss in that thought. When we feel God taking care of us, when we feel God moving through us, it's the greatest joy. When we get rid of those desires that even delude the wise, the more we get rid of those desires and attachments, the more bliss there is. Swami was told in one of those Brigu readings or Agastya, some of these saints who lived thousands and thousands of years ago wrote predictions for people living today. And Swami got one of these readings, and it was said that he had achieved bliss in his chakras. This was at the time of Kurukshetra, the battle of the Bhagavad Gita. And that idea of bliss in the chakras is not just poetic. It's not just a figure of speech that he achieved this peace and bliss. It's real. And that's what we're headed for. So the more that we can get rid of these attachments, desires, emotion, the more we can become truly centered, truly deeply centered, the more that bliss comes to the surface. So we have to keep our eyes on the goal. We have to keep moving. It's so easy to just want to sit down and rest and just back off from the constant thought of having to move forward spiritually. But we can't let down. Time is short. We have this blessing of a human lifetime. And let's make progress while we can.
That classic line in the middle of this reading, inevitably spiritual aspirants do not emerge effortlessly from the vortex of ego, is like the understatement of the year. And it's interesting because it requires, as Swami goes on to say right after that, he goes on to say it requires persistent self-offering, sort of layer by layer by layer. And it struck me that there's a good reason why it takes that. You know, we could think, oh, well, in one, you know, if I just get one day right, or if I just get one meditation right, or one kriya right, that's all it's going to take. I'll go into bliss, I'll offer up the ego, it'll be done. Yeah, it's a great idea. And in theory, it's actually quite true. However, it takes a little bit of practice because the ego has a job. Next week, the topic is ego, friend or foe. So we're going to talk a little more about this. This is an important topic. But how does it apply? The ego's job is to say to us, you live, I'm sort of rephrasing what Nirmala just said. You live in a body, there's an opportunity, the opportunity is now, you don't know how long it's for, you don't know how long this life will go on. Take advantage of it every single day. And the ego is characterized in the classic epic, the Mahabharata, by the character Bhishma. And Bhishma is like the grandfather of everybody. And he has this very kingly role, and he has taken a vow that he will never marry. He's solitary, and he's in charge, and he received a boon in connection with this vow that he took. The boon is that he can never be killed. And that is exactly what our ego has as its boon. It cannot be killed. Our self-awareness can never be lost. It can never be overcome. It can be offered up, but only when its job is finished. And so in the story, Bhishma, this invincible warrior who cannot be killed, he gets immobilized. How does he get immobilized? He gets shot with so many arrows that he's just like this solid mass of arrows. And to the point where when he falls over, he doesn't even fall over on the ground. He falls over on a bed of arrows. It doesn't sound like a very comfortable place to be. But he's a tough guy. But anyway, but then he can't fight anymore because he's just like covered with arrows. Well, at the end of the story, they all come to him because he knows it's getting to be time for him to offer up his life. It's time for him to relinquish his life willingly. And before he can do that, he has to teach a class. And the class is, he has to teach the Pandavas how to rule their kingdom dharmically. The Pandavas represent the 5 chakras. And so he teaches this elaborate class on what is the job of a king. How do we rule the kingdom of our body, the kingdom of our consciousness appropriately? And and it's all sorts of interesting stuff. One of the pieces of it is the king is supposed to have spies in the camp of his enemies so that he knows what they're doing. Segueing back to what Nirmala was saying about the thieves and the robbers. You have spies in the camp of the thieves and the robbers to find out if there's ice cream in the refrigerator so you can give it away or get rid of it or do whatever. It's like you find out what's going on. And it's interesting that this topic is called Who Are True Christians? Because, when I read that title the first time, I thought, whoa, I used to obsess about this kind of thing. I was raised Lutheran. I had friends who were Catholic. I had friends who were Jewish. I had friends who were agnostic. I had friends who were atheist. A whole spectrum. I wanted to know who's right. Who's got the right score on all of this? It just drove me up the wall. I used to pester my pastors, how do I know? Oh, well, we believe we've got the right thing. It's like, great, well, fine. Well, what about they say the same thing? Who's got it? And the interesting thing is that it has to start from inside. It's not, this is fundamental yoga. This is like Yoga 101. Start where you are. Not where you wish you were, not where you think you should be, blah, blah, blah. Start where you are. And then you can grow from there. Well, then the question for each person in terms of spirituality is, what leads you forward? How can you take one step forward from where you are on the path toward freedom, toward enlightenment? And so the same activity for one person isn't necessarily going to help another. Swami used to give the example, if a lazy person wakes up one fine morning and says, I'm just going to become a millionaire. I'm just going to put out the effort. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do it the right way. Everybody goes, okay, good, Mr. Lazy Person. You're not going to be so lazy anymore. That's great. That's, do something for the society. Fine. If you become a millionaire, good for you. If Mahatma Gandhi says the same thing, I'm just sick and tired of this nonviolent stuff. It's just not working for me. It's, everybody goes, that kind of looks like a step backwards for you. Well, same thing for us. We have to find for ourselves what is the next step. And of course, there are universal principles. I mean, you go against the yamas or the niyamas, it's not helpful. I mean, those are universal laws that apply to anyone. But where we are individually, Swamiji was very careful about this. He did not offer his advice uselessly to people who didn't want to hear it. He would certainly tell people if he felt they were doing something wrong, but only if they were open to hearing it. Not just, I mean, okay, if somebody was about to fall off a cliff, he might grab them and say, stop. But I mean, as far as more subtle aspects, it's like he would wait until people were ready to hear. He did not push it on people. And this is the tricky part. I'll segue back to something else Nirmala said, talking about our culture. This culture of the US is very aware peripherally. We have peripheral vision. We are aware of troubles in other places in the world. And our kindly approach is wonderful in many cases. But in some cases, other people or other cultures or other situations have to solve it for themselves. And putting our value on it or our way of approaching it often creates this awkward dynamic. And so we have to be sensitively aware. And so this segues back to the affirmation, which is calm, talking about calmness, holding up our inspiration to the calmness within. Because it's only there that we can feel, okay, is this the right thing? Should I say it? Should I do it? Is this a step forward? And if it's calm, there's a really good chance that it's right. Swamiji was very, very cautious about inner guidance. And he had incredible inner guidance. But he never, as Nirmala said, he never presumed on it. And he would ask people, he would ask us personally, what do you think of this? Could this be a good thing? I mean, I think he knew perfectly well, but still, it was like, as an example to us and as a potential for him, it's like he was always aware. It could be inspiration, or it could be imagination. It could be hope. It could be a thought, or it could be true, but only for a little while. And so he was always testing it. He was always careful with that. We have to learn to navigate through life according to that inner guidance, according to that inner self-awareness. And when we do so, we can do so with great, great power and great awareness. We can be a great blessing in the world, but we have to always maintain that ability to listen, that ability to just hold it up and test it. Is it real? Is it right? Okay, then I'll go with it. And aware of that, you know, one of the reasons I chose the little whispers reading, I'll just close with this little thought. One of the ways to overcome ego is to develop or to remember our true nature as children of God. Very simple, very calm, very open to the divine, just like a little child. This little girl, you know, yay tall, I was in a room with some people, and she looked up at me and, you know, reached both arms up and was like, "You standing there, what are you doing? Pick me up." So I picked her up. And, you know, and she was happy, and she sort of gurgled for a little while, and, you know, I thought, okay, well, we've done what we came here to do. So I put her back down, and about 10 seconds later, the hands go back. Wait a minute, I wasn't done with you yet. You know, it's like, but I mean, there is that aspect of our nature. It's like, reach up to God with the faith of a little child to just say, come on. I remember when we lived in Seattle, friends of ours were the main ministers. We were associate ministers up there, and we used to be with their family a lot. And the little guy was about, again, yay big. And after service, he was endlessly trying to get his dad out of there. And of course, Dad is busy talking with all the people because that's his job to do. I remember he would grab Puru was his dad. He would grab Puru's robe. I want you. Yes, I want you. Well, it's okay to do that with Divine Mother. We can be very frank and forthright in the spirit and faith of a child. I want you. And when we do that, then we will find that we have more of that. Because we will find that we tend to drop out of our hands when we grab onto the Divine Mother. We drop whatever it is that we were holding on to, thinking, like the cell phone, for example. A number of things fall on the floor that we were holding on to that prevented us from grabbing onto the Divine Mother. And then we can have that presence more and more completely. I don't know if you guys are hearing this thing cracking